Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Nick and Joe Show. I'm Nick. He's Joe. He's in Ottawa, and I'm not.
And,
I
and
was
that
talking.
says it all.
That's all you need to know.
That's all
I was
one
talking to
needs to
my
know.
mother-in-law, or my wife was talking to my mother-in-law. They live down in Gravenhurst, and they just keep getting hammered. They just keep getting hammered. They got more snow again. Like it's snowmageddon down there. It was like that last winter, and it's like that again this winter. Uh, we did. We had some of our kids come up from the Ottawa Valley to visit us here in Sioux Lookout. Mark and Gabby came up to visit us for about a week during reading week. Like university students actually read during that week. You saw that, eh? The air quotes. But they were a lot of fun to have around. We just got used to having them around, and then we had to kick them out and send them back. But that meant that we had to go to Winnipeg. Now, look, I don't have anything against people in Winnipeg other than the fact they're Winnipeg Jets fans, not Leaf fans.
And they love their Jets. I got to
They
tell you something.
do. I don't know
Just
why, but they
before,
do.
I know where you want to go with this, Nick, but before you go there, just let me say on a positive note about Winnipeg is they love their Jets and they love their Blue Bombers.
I think they love their Blue Bombers even more.
It could be, but it's a quasi religion there.
Yeah. You know, I didn't, I never thought of it, but I should have worn my John Tavares Leaf jersey um, walking around because we were actually went for dinner while we were in Winnipeg at a place called Sparks Sports Bar, which is actually in the same building as the Canada Life Center where the Winnipeg Jets play. And next to the sports bar, bolted right to the side of it, is a casino. So you can go in there, play the slots and gamble and all that stuff. I've never been into that, but I digress. So we go there and we're looking for a motel to stay in. We don't
You're
want,
talking about going to Winnipeg now,
yes,
generally.
we're on our
Okay.
way because we have to drop the kids at the airport the following day. So with that, we'll go into Winnipeg on a Saturday or whatever yesterday was, day before. Where are we? Today's Sunday. Yeah, Saturday. Um, anyway, and just spend some time with them. We went to the Winnipeg Zoo, which was a lot of fun. It really was. I'm not much for zoos, but it was well laid out, and there were a lot of very interesting animals in the zoo. We got a chance to see a real live polar bear, several of them, and I realized why I don't ever want to meet one in the wild because when they stand up, they're a lot taller than I am. But we saw spotted snow leopards and a whole bunch of different animals from all over the world, not just from Winnipeg. That would be a different kind of zoo. But to get anywhere, I just, oh my God, this city, it's like if you were to take an octopus and throw it up against the wall and then trace the outline, that's your city map. It's that bad. Like the people in Winnipeg are wonderful. I had many encounters with them and they were very nice, very kind, certainly helpful. You know, we stayed at a Hojo's in Winnipeg last night. They had a nice, really nice continental breakfast. The staff was great. So it's not about the people of Winnipeg, other than the municipal planners. Like how in good yes, there's supposed to be a ring road, but if you want to go anywhere, and if you're going to use Google Maps because you don't know the area very well, and nobody knows how to read a good old fashioned road map anymore. I haven't actually seen one in a couple of years now. I used to live by them when I was a trucker, but it was insane. We were going across town trying to get from where we had supper at Sparks because all the fans, the place was sucked till the game started. Then they all walked in to the arena, and we walked into Spark so we could sit down and have some. And the food was really good. Uh, the Shark of the North, yes, Marin, that is absolutely true. But these sharks like humans. The other sharks don't. Anyway, uh, but it took us right through residential backyards. I mean, I call my GPS voice um, Juliet, and I was ready to throw her out the window because every time now go down here, turn left, turn. You look at the map, so if you just left me on Main Street or on Portage Avenue, whatever it is, yeah, it's taking me about 2 minutes longer, but I wouldn't be driving at 3 miles an hour down this crowded, narrow residential street with kids playing street hockey. Just like, give me a break. And on top of that, the other thing, I have a little pet peeve. You know how much I like the metric system, right? I don't, not even a
Oh,
little. And you have the option with Google Maps that you can get your directions in either metric or imperial. Well, me being a stubborn old bugger, I select imperial. And when we first start using it, it gives me 300 yards, mile and a half. You're going to make a right, you're going to make a left. That doesn't matter, metric or imperial. But it talks to me in a language I understand until I get to where I'm going, and then I chart the new course. Then it's all back to metric again. Why it does that, I have no idea, but it's enough to make me just, I don't suffer that stuff the same way I used to.
Nick, my only complaint, it's funny because on the Google Maps, etc. First of all, the positive complaint. This, now you
Positive
see, you've got
complaint.
my brain muddled like scrambled eggs there a little bit.
Listen, after
So
spending
a positive comment and a somewhat negative comment. On the positive side, my wife was taking one of our grandchildren skiing this week at Camp Fortune, which is a little bit north of Ottawa. And they got directions from the people at Camp Fortune, which were written out, and they got lost. So she called me and I said, well, why don't you just use the Google Maps on your phone? And she said, I have no idea how to use I have no idea how to use GPS. So I told her, well, how old is your granddaughter again? 13 years old. I said, give her your
she'll know.
smartphone. She'll know how to use it. And that's exactly what happened. They got up to Camp Fortune and had a day of skiing. And by the way, just as an aside, this is a granddaughter from New Jersey. And she and her younger brother were visiting along with their mother for a few days.
Right.
And I have to tell you, they had never seen, well, their mother had because she grew up here, but the kids had never seen so much snow in their lives. and they loved it. I mean, they couldn't get enough of it. Anyway, the other thing I have to say about Google Maps is it's very funny when the narrator, the voice in Montreal starts to trying to pronounce the street names with a French accent. Please,
you've seen the movie. You've seen the movie A Bridge Too Far, right?
I have.
Okay, Gene Hackman plays a Polish general.
Right,
and he has the worst Polish accent I've ever heard. And I know what a Polish accent sounds like. I spent 20 years right next door to Wilno.
It's Gene Hackman.
Yeah.
It's not just the Polish accent. Any accent by Gene Hackman
okay,
just not sound
but even
right.
He was smart enough to give it up halfway through the movie, and he said he must have said to the director, "I'm just going to quit trying because I'm butchering this." Because oh my God, it was terrible. So this is when you think about autonomous cars, they use Google Maps to get around. If Google Maps can't get it right with an intelligent, sentient human being in the car, okay, what are they going to do with a computer who can't figure this stuff out because it's getting the wrong input?
There's just no hope for humanity.
Oh my God, we're going to drive over a cliff. So that was my experience in Winnipeg, and we really enjoyed having the kids. It was a lot of fun. But
you should have asked me about places to stay before you went, Nick. I know Winnipeg well, including a motel in Winnipeg. Please, nobody in Winnipeg now. If you're catching this, okay, this is not meant to be in any way a disparagement of Winnipeg. Okay,
right.
But if you're looking for a motel in Winnipeg, okay, it's like 2 stars is not 2 stars in Winnipeg.
No, no, no.
So,
We
but
stayed at one the
there are
last
some,
time we were there.
but there are lots of hotels right at the airport, or right near the airport, and they're good quality hotels, and they're very reasonably priced.
There was
Um, uh,
one we stayed
but
at
you,
a while ago called the Canada. I think it's called the Canada Inn, and it was a little pricey. It was like $250 a night. Oh, that was
okay,
nice. That was a
okay,
nice motel.
so
I won't mention the ones that weren't that we stayed at because I don't want to get sued. But
yeah.
but there were a couple. There was one that we stayed in. No.
Yeah, no,
If
we're
you want to
forget
know
it.
which ones not to stay in, you can send me a text or an email or something. I'll tell you what it was that way, but I'm not doing it here. But
No, not on
wow.
live, not on a
Oh,
broadcast. Okay.
that's right. We're not going to do that because I'm sure the owners try real hard, but let's just say there's good hotels and motels and there's not so good. And for a
Well,
whole bunch of reasons.
it is what it is, Nick.
That's right. Now, speaking of is what it
Yeah,
is,
because our listeners don't just want travel information.
speaking of which, I got to go back to Vancouver this weekend, but
Oh,
we can
wait,
talk about that later.
yeah.
Anyway, there is a story I want to get to. Here we are. Let me bring this up. This is, I think you're going to see more and more of this as time goes by. People are going to realize what they're learning now is that, and you people like you and I have known all along, the whole response to COVID was a disaster. It was unnecessary. It was overhanded. It didn't work. The measures put in place did nothing to slow the spread of the virus, yeah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this story comes to us from West Nipissing, Ontario. And the headline reads, Unnecessary Harm and Animosity. Ontario councillor apologizes for mandatory vaccine policy. Now, I'm just going to tell you who the councillor was, and I'm going to skip down in the article because I've posted it on my Facebook page. People want to go and find it. They can read the whole thing for herself. Let's see. Her name is Anne Tessier. She's a councillor out of West Nipissing. Okay. Now, let me read her comments as far as they're quoted here in the story. I want to take a moment to acknowledge that this policy caused a lot of unnecessary harm and animosity within our workforce and community. I believe that this possible policy was mistakenly adopted 12 months ago. The general population knows that today the COVID vaccine doesn't stop the spread of the virus. 12 months ago, the municipal council was well aware the spread did not correlate with vaccination status prior to this policy being adopted. So they knew it, and they went ahead and adopted it anyway, is what she's saying. Despite a constituent having represented or presented Public Health Ontario data to the council showing that by January 2022, there were equally or more cases reported per capita in vaccinated people versus unvaccinated people, which resulted in the implementation of this punitive policy. With all my heart, I extend my apologies to those who are affected negatively by this policy, and I hope that as a municipality and a community, we can move forward. Okay, so I think you're going to see more of this coming, Joseph. I really do, because like you've often said that people get into politics for sometimes some altruistic reasons. They really want to help. And sometimes there's, they do things that look good on the surface, but come back and it just doesn't pan out that way. And this is one of the first cases I've seen where a politician has stood up and said, okay, we goofed. I'm sorry. That's on us. That is the summation of what she said in my mind. And I think this is going to become more and more prevalent because as people begin to understand the depth of the what's the word, hoax, and the depth of the damage done by this hoax and by this, I'm not saying the virus was a hoax by any means, but everything that they imposed on us trying to control it was done even though they knew better, as she points out. They knew the vaccines didn't actually protect anybody. They knew the masks didn't work. They knew all of this stuff, and they went and did it anyway.
Well,
So
Nick,
this is a reckoning.
Nick, I first of all, I think you're right. I think that we're going to see a lot more of this kind of confession, for
Yes,
want of
good word for it.
a better way to put it. But I I don't. I'm one of those people that says it wasn't really a hoax. It was wrong. And the people that opposed this, it was self evidently wrong. I mean, it was clearly wrong. The minute okay, we've all had vaccinations, okay, for one thing or another.
That's right.
Uh, and you have a vaccination, and then you have a booster. And sometimes you have a booster 10, 15, 20 years later.
Tetanus is a great example.
Okay. But the minute they started talking about, first of all, you had to have the vaccine, and then you had to have a booster like 30 days later, and then you had to have another booster after 6 months, and then another booster and another booster. It was clearly not working. Now, did it? This is one of the problems, right? Woulda, coulda, shoulda, right? Did this slow the spread of the virus? I don't know. I frankly, I haven't looked at the data, and one of the problems, of course, is they did this, and so it's really hard to test what would have happened if they hadn't done these vaccines. Okay, very difficult to come up with a clear, concise scientific answer to that. Very difficult to study it because
Well,
you have to
let
have a
me
control group.
let me
But
interrupt you just for a second on that point alone. I think there were enough non-vaccinated people who simply refused to take it, that they could have done a test between vaxxed and unvaxxed and the spread and so on. There were
yeah,
enough bodies out there they could have done it.
but there are too many variables. Okay,
Well,
what kind of a population are you living in? How exposed are you to
yeah, okay,
the
fair enough.
virus?
I get
Okay,
it.
so it's a really difficult thing, and so I'm very circumspect. I'm not, I'm not running around saying this was proven wrong, this was proven right, and things like that, except to say that it was very clear that in terms of preventing the illness, having a second and a third and a fourth booster in that, it to me it was getting to be ridiculous. So, um, but here's the problem, and this is a problem that we run into a lot in public policy today, is the lack of. There are a few things here that I'm going to touch on that all contribute to the bigger problem. Okay, the first one is that you have this situation, Nick, where elected officials are completely 100% beholden to the so-called experts. Elected officials get elected and then they don't make decisions. They may pass laws on a macro level, but then they hand it over to the so-called experts in order to enforce the law, make the decisions, et cetera, et cetera. And it begs the question: why do we elect people and then they in principle they say, well, we're not going to interfere in the decisions of the officials. And this is a situation that actually cried out for elected officials to step in and to say, no, we're not doing this. Because what ended up happening was it was the health authorities, and again, they were evidently wrong, but it was the health authorities that were basically given complete control over government policy. And there were a lot of people on the economic side that were saying, hey, slow down, guys. You can't just shut the economy down without longer term ramifications that we're now seeing in terms of inflation, market disjointedness, etc. And it's going to take probably a few years before all of that starts to work itself out. So the first problem is elected officials that are too afraid to step in and say, no, we're not doing this, just handing it off to the experts. But compounding this is two other problems. The first is so many elected officials having such poor basic education, and this is a general problem in our society
Yeah, that's
these
true.
days,
Yeah.
is that it's really easy for them to be hoodwinked by experts who are pushing a particular, not an agenda, but a particular point of view. And there's not going to be 100% consensus on some of these things, as there clearly wasn't on this particular question. Um, uh, but what ends up happening is a lot of these elected officials, and not just elected officials, as I say, it's a general problem in our society, don't really have a clear clue as to whether or not what they're being told makes complete sense.
Yeah.
And the last thing is, on top of all of that, is just pure laziness. I'm not looking into it. This is what they said. What am I going to do? I'm not a doctor. Well, as I always said all the way through this pandemic, okay, Nick, I'm not a doctor either, but I know when my head's hanging over the toilet after having had too much to drink, I'm being sick. And
Yeah,
if
I've
I'm
got
and
another
if I'm
analogy
and
that
if
goes
my
along
head's hanging
that.
over the toilet and I'm vomiting and I haven't had too much to drink, then I'm probably really sick. There is actually an illness here. I
That's
don't need
right.
a
It's
doctor
not
for
just a
every single
40-pounder
thing.
flu. But I think though that when I say hoax, a hoax in my mind is something you perpetrate on someone else that isn't true for reasons that are not in that person's best interest. Um, Maybe I'm using the wrong phrase, but the bottom line is, and I certainly admit your point about how people uh, they don't seem to have the educational foundation. Let's put it this way. Since I got into the mainstream media, and I know what's going on way before that, or before I became involved in broadcasting, and way before that, there was a problem in our education system. And I think now you're seeing that these 20, 30, 40-year-old people who grew up during that time period, who didn't get that foundation that you and I might have gotten, people older than ourselves, when it's still something of an education system, like you took basic biology and knew what photosynthesis was, that kind of thing. Or they took basic economics and could balance a checkbook. These people are now prime suspects to be hoodwinked by people with less than noble intentions. And I think that's you've kind of hit on something here that I hadn't considered before, but is now the more I think about it, the more obvious it becomes. We always complain about how kids can't read, they can't use cursive writing. Well, that didn't start yesterday. They can't add. They ask a kid, ask somebody under 30 to find the square root of 49. Now, you know, if you don't know, I know but it's 7. We learn that in math in school. But because other issues have reduced the time available in the classroom to teach the fundamentals that everything else rests on, math, science, reading, comprehension, these things, so what you're being told, and you can make judgments, because that's what you get hired for. When you're a politician, you get hired to make judgments for the good of the constituents you represent, not to get reelected. Although that's the modern definition of why people go into politics, is to get reelected. In a traditional sense, you're there to speak up for those who cannot be there. Not that they're not smart, not that they don't have anything intelligent to say, but their lives demand their attention. So they hire you to represent them at these particular meetings and to pass laws and bylaws and all that stuff for their benefit, not something that denigrates their lifestyle.
And that was my cue.
And that was your cue. When I quit talking, that's your cue.
I know. Look, you've said it. You're absolutely right, and unfortunately, we find ourselves in the situation that we're in now. And the reality, Nick, is that none of this. We're really really quick to nowadays to point fingers and put blame, and assume the worst possible motivations in people. And when really so much of the situation that we find ourselves in is really just based on, well, frankly, just basic ignorance of so many different things.
I've come up with a
People
new
are just,
phrase to describe people who are not yet ready to take on these kinds of responsibilities. And I use it on my kids. I was using it this last week. You haven't had enough time in the cooker.
yeah, well, that's true. But one thing I will say, Nick, and that is that I think this is an important thing as well. It's not it's what we're talking about in terms of basic education is not about being able to function at a working, paying job. This is day in and day out stuff.
Yeah.
Things that you have to have just common sense on how you react to changing situations in day-to-day life around you, okay? You have to be able to add and subtract and multiply and divide. You have to know basic math. Yeah, there are so many things that you should know basically, okay? And we have this notion that if a scientist says something, that it must be true. And then
Yep.
it becomes a question of, well, which scientist are we going to believe? This one or this one? Well, I like to have a basic education. I like to think that I have enough of a background in basic science that I can make reasonable judgments on what I'm being told. This is the whole, and it's not just science. It's history and it's geography, and all of these things. These are, we live in a society, in a democratic society, where we all participate in the big decisions through elections. Okay? I mean, that's the reality. And if not by elections directly, then through polling where people are giving their opinions, etc., and politicians, the decision makers, want to know what we're thinking. Okay? You have to know things before you just express an opinion. And too many of us don't know or don't care. And that's the
even more
tragedy.
dangerous.
That's the tragedy of it. Okay.
Yeah.
Is the saying, right? I went to a person and said to them, the problem with society these days is there's too much ignorance and apathy. And the fellow looked at me and said, "Yeah, I don't know and I don't care."
Yeah, that's as funny as that is. It's also a really sad testament of our times, isn't it?
But it's true, and it permeates everything. And more and more we become just a society of people waiting to be entertained. Don't interfere with my entertainment. Okay, I just want to be entertained.
When I go back to the heading I put on this, the tide is beginning to turn, or we're going to see more of this. It's because people, even if they don't know and don't care, are now starting to ask questions and are taking an interest. That's what I meant by it's beginning to change. You've got parents showing up at school board meetings. You've got people standing up and demanding answers to the kinds of questions that you and I have been asking for 20 years, maybe longer, And I'm not trying to say that you and I are some kind of prophet sitting on a mountaintop gazing into a crystal ball. We're just, looking at life and saying, how does this supposed to work? How can you make X and, the checkbook balance if you think the economy balances itself?
Well, all you have to do is lived a few years, and if you haven't lived long enough to have experienced it yourself, know where to find out how many hurricanes we have every year on average. And then when next time somebody comes and says climate change is causing this massive increase in hurricanes, you know better. You just know. Nick, we're going to have to go for a break here. So we're going to be back in a couple of minutes here on the Nick and Joe Show. Stay tuned.
Who says you can't turn the clock back? Experience the excitement of open-air flying and see Canada's National Capital Region like you've never seen it before from the open cockpit of a vintage 1930s biplane. Are you up for the adventure? Put on your helmet and goggles and strap yourself in. Book your flight today. Go to OttawaBiplaneAdventures.com. That's OttawaBiplaneAdventures.com. Ottawa Biplane Adventures. The adventure begins here.
Oh my gosh, that was so exciting! I gotta do it again.
Ice cream. Give me ice cream with whipped cream. Ice cream. Give me ice cream with whipped cream. Ice cream. A million flavors, let's just do it. Tie me up with ice cream. Sunny days need that cold hit. Ice cream. A million flavors, let's just do it. Tie me up with ice cream. Sunny days need that cold hit. That strawberry chocolate taste. Ice cool vanilla for me. Hundreds and thousands. I need an ice cream island. Give me ice cream with whipped cream. Strawberry sauce. And see my face gleam. I need a wafer on top. Just ice cream full stop. So take me to the pudding shop. Ice cream. A million flavors, let's just do it. Tie me up with ice cream. Sunny days need that cold hit. Ice cream. A million flavors, let's just do it. Tie me up with ice cream. Sunny days need that cold hit. That strawberry chocolate taste.
There is just a feeling that this might be right for us, for you and me. There is just a look I think this might be right for us, for you and me. There is just a feeling that this might be right for us, for you and me. There is just a look I think this might.
All right, there we are. Just enough time to go refresh my. We have one of the best sources of water in Canada, I have no doubt. This is just spring water from the edge of town. There's a spring that flows like a two-inch hose, and you just go there. You can fill up all the water you want. It's been running for years, and it is the nicest tasting water I've ever had. And boy, I'll tell you, I drink it by the gallon.
Yeah, it's funny, Nick, on that subject, a few months ago, I guess now, when they had the annual climate change conference in Egypt, and all the talk of that conference was how we're running out of water. And, I was pointing out to my wife, we were talking about it afterwards, and I said, this again comes down to just basic geography. Anybody that has basic understanding of geography, knowledge of geography, can tell you that most of the world's surface is covered with water.
We're not running out of water.
We're not. We will never run out of water. Okay.
It's funny.
Now, in fairness, just let me finish this, Nick. In fairness, most of that water is not. It's not fresh water. It's salt water. But we have the technology to desalinate that water.
I know.
It's not possible if we're running out of water, it's not because we're not conserving it enough. It's because we're not investing in the right projects to ensure that we have adequate, clean, fresh water for the people that need it, both producing it and getting it to the people who need it. And that's technology thing that you're not going to solve by cutting back on use of water and all of the climate change crap that's going on.
Let me ask you something. When you were on steamers back in your Navy days, did you ever go down into the boiler room?
I tried not to.
I didn't ask you if you tried not to. I asked you if you did.
Well, when you're a young lad and you're starting out and that, you have to, go on these tours and get to know the ships and stuff like that.
Okay,
So
so when
the
you went
answer is
down,
yes.
okay, the
But
answer
I
when
grew
you
up,
go,
just sorry, Nick. Okay, but before you go anywhere with this, okay, I grew up in boiler rooms.
yeah,
My father, that was my father's business.
okay,
So I didn't grow up on ship boiler rooms, but I believe me, I grew up in real boiler rooms. Okay, I know what it's like to punch those Scotch Marine fire tube boilers. Okay,
that's not where I was going with that.
I know, but I'm just saying.
Okay, so
Okay,
you're familiar with steam technology.
very familiar. Yes.
Okay, so when you went down the ladder, what's the first the after on the after
Uh,
boiler room hatch? What's the first piece of kit you came to? Do you
I don't
remember?
know. You got me there.
They were called Maxim evaporators, and they would produce over 2 tons
Oh,
of water an
okay.
hour, and that was feed water and domestic water for the ship,
Yeah.
feed water for the boilers, and domestic water for people like you and me. So yes, we have the technology, but it's funny that we ended up going here because today I just was surfing the net and came across marine desalinators. Okay, for in other words, saltwater desalinators for shipboard application, for pleasure yachts, or for industrial applications. And they have them produce 24,000 gallons an hour. Now,
Yeah.
these are, multi-million dollar units,
Of
but tell
course.
me Egypt is running out of water? Egypt with all
L-
the princes and the money they have? Come
Well,
on.
look, go to Israel,
I was just going to
where,
mention
where
that.
we've been. I've been many times, and I can tell you, yeah, there are water problems sometimes if there's a drought.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, what they've done is they've been investing in desalinization and water distribution in a serious way. Okay, so you're not running out of water in Israel.
No.
There's no excuse for Egypt on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea to run out of water. What you need to do is you need to make desalinization and distribution a
A priority.
national priority, but they
Precisely.
don't. Of course, there's a lot of corruption issues in a lot of these countries as well.
Yeah.
But California, why would California, which is on along the west coast, it's not a very wide state, so there's easy access to the coast from all points of California. Why would California be suffering from a water shortage? And the simple answer is because they haven't paid attention to producing potable water and
Well,
distributing it into the interior of the state. It's
well,
a,
look what's happening to Lake Mead. It's drying up. There soon won't be if there still is a Lake Mead, there won't be
well,
because they haven't done exactly what you're talking about. Why is there not in San
yeah,
Diego a desalination plant or in any other point along the coast, a massive desalination plant with a pipeline that goes through the mountains to some of the inner places where they have a shortage of water? They could very easily do it. As you and I both know, the water that comes out of a desalinator, or in this case, an evaporator, is very easily drinkable. There's nothing wrong with it, so they could do it if they wanted to. It's just never been a priority before.
look, and just to sort of put a finishing touch, because I know this isn't where we wanted to go right now in this segment, but you you have two choices. You could try to stop the glaciers from melting,
Yeah, good luck with
okay,
that.
which is a source of natural clean water, okay. But here's the thing: climate change is either happening because of human activity. I don't believe that, but climate change is happening, whether it's human activity or it's just a natural process. It's You're not going to stop it because we don't produce enough greenhouse gases in Canada, for instance, to affect the climate one way or the other.
Right.
So, unless you're going to get countries like India and China and all of these countries to actually take seriously their responsibilities on the climate change file, assuming that the worst prognostications and the worst causes are in fact accurate. Okay, and they're not going to do it. And there's a lot of other reasons why they won't do it. There's a couple of great YouTube clips we'll have to do maybe next week if you remind me, Nick, on
Okay.
this particular subject. But the bottom line is this, okay? We're spending all of our time and effort and wringing our hands and angst and money and all this stuff trying to prevent the glaciers from melting. Spend a fraction of that time and effort and resources producing fresh water from the Pacific Ocean, which is the largest reservoir of water on the planet. You will never run out of water.
If
There
you
it
run
is.
out of water, then you've got bigger trouble than whether you ran out of water. Okay, so that was completely out of the blue. I just happened to be enjoying this wonderful spring water. And it's right on the edge of town. It's like within a quarter of a mile of where I'm sitting right now. We'll go down and grab 5 or 6 gallons and put it on a rack in the back. Throw one of them in the fridge. It's ice cold. It's delicious. Anyway,
Well, you better be careful, Nick, because if you start talking that way in public, it's only a matter of time before the government steps in to tax it,
well,
which is a great
give me-
segue.
yes, because that's where we're going next. There's a story. I can close that one and we can talk about this one. Let me introduce the readers to this. This headline from CTV News caught my attention. Almost half of Canadian gig workers not willing to declare all income at tax time, survey finds. Now, for those of you who don't know what a gig worker is anyone who has a side hustle. Maybe they clean eaves troughs for cash in the summertime, or maybe they have an online store and they're selling little, things online, or they provide some kind of service or product, and it's done for cash outside the main. I'm hesitant to use the word black market, but it's outside the traditional market, and they're doing it, and then they're not claiming it at income tax time. Well, you know what? Somehow I don't find that surprising at all. I'm surprised it's only 44% because there is a limit. We call it diminishing returns, where you have a situation where the government takes a screw to your wallet and they keep tightening it and they keep tightening it. And sooner or later, there's no more money coming out, no matter how hard they twist it. People have reached that threshold where they say, you know something, I'm not giving you any more money because you're not, number one, you've already taken way too much, and two, what you have taken, you have thrown away. It's not going to benefit anybody in Canada unless they fit in a particular box. But in general, for the general population, there's no benefit. The carbon tax is a classic example. Okay, so what they're doing is they're trying to shelter their income from taxation. Let me read to you just a little bit from the story. While it's easy to think that smaller amounts may go unnoticed, but by not declaring all income to the Canada Revenue Agency, Canadians face the risk of not just having to pony up the full amount of taxes owing if they're audited, but they also will be charged interest and could face substantial penalties if it's discovered, said Yannick Lemay, Learning Program Lead and Tax Specialist for H&R Block Canada, in a press release. For 74% of Canadian gig workers, these kinds of jobs are in addition to their primary source of income, such as their full-time job. I don't think those threats are going to stop people. I think that people have reached the point that, like I said, they're tired of being taxed. They work hard for their money. They certainly think that they're not getting value for the tax they are sending in. So what would compel them? They're going to run the risk of the audit, is what we're saying. The risk is now, the threat is not perceived as greater than the risk. They kind of balance that out, and they've said, okay, I'll run, because they can't audit everybody. And some people are going to get caught, no doubt about it. But the vast majority of them are going to get away with it. And I'm not trying to say you should break the law, but I'm not surprised that this kind of thing happens. Look at, we talked about this before. The kinds of people who would be willing to engage in this behavior are, I'm going to guess, at the young YouTubers, the young vloggers, people with the side hustles who are out there every day creating an income that they don't need to go to a job for. So there's no T4 slip. So what compels them to report their income? Why would they? Why
Well,
not
that's
just keep it?
Well, that's exactly why the government instituted source deductions for income tax. It's funny because, again, here we go. If you know the history, you know that income tax was actually supposed to be a temporary measure
Temporary, yeah,
in order to pay for
for
the
World War One,
during World War One.
right?
And of course, the idea was that you pay your taxes, you have your income, you report how much income you have, and you pay your taxes. But of course, it's all on the honor system. It was always on the honor system. And then before we knew it, the government stepped in and said, well, we have to do this source deduction thing because we don't trust people, and with justification, because you're citing a study that's just been done and talking about gig workers.
Right.
But I'm recalling a number of years ago some research that was done that showed that a majority of Canadians are prepared to, well, let's call it what it is, cheat on their taxes. Okay, and so there is an element. There are two sides to this. Okay, Nick. The first is, just as you said, people are overtaxed. They don't feel that they're getting good value for the tax dollars, and I agree with them. The single biggest item in anybody's budget today is taxes. Now, you may think to yourself, no, I'm paying much more in this area, okay? But when you start to dig down and you see all of the cost of regulation and red tape, plus hidden taxes that are built into the price of whatever it is that you're buying in terms of goods and services, taxes are the biggest item that the majority of Canadian families pay. And so obviously, okay, you want to have more cash in your pocket, particularly today with cost of living increasing, wages being more or less stagnant. It's people are being squeezed, and so of course they're going to do that. So I get it, I understand. On the other hand, I can't help but be just a little bit troubled by the ease with which people are going to cheat on their taxes, because I'd be less than honest if I didn't say that isn't that a bit of a sign of how people are willing to be dishonest, and not see it as dishonesty.
No, you're
So
right. You're right.
I'm not. I can't defend cheating on one's taxes, even if I agree and understand where it comes from, the motivation. Um, okay, yeah,
But
that's
let me
where I
give you
go
an
with it.
example. If you were to go out and buy a cabin cruiser boat, do you know what it would cost you to change the name of that cabin cruiser boat? Just the
Oh,
name. $250. $250 just to paint another name on the side of your boat. Now, this is the kind of stuff that just you go, why? Why? Who decided that was a good idea? It's nothing but a cash grab. Remember the old sticker program I used to bellyache about all the time? You put
yeah.
that little sticker on the back of your car so that the car, same car, hasn't gone through a safety, same driver, guy's got the same record, and yet without that sticker, he was guilty of a fine and could pay up to $110 and maybe more if he just ignored the fine. So it's there's so many cash grabs. Like that's what I meant by, I'm not suggesting people break the law either.
Of course not.
But you're right. I understand completely why people do it. I don't blame them, because we have gotten to a point. Lori makes a couple of good comments. She says, taking too much from our workers already. Enough is enough. And she said, I paid unemployment insurance my whole life and never collected. So not only is there the tax side of it, it's when I do want to draw benefits. Like, look what the old age pension is. Okay, if for a guy like me, it's like $600 a month. What am I? Now, it's my money. I'm getting it back. So but $600 a month, really? That's my old age pension. This is the great social utopia we were all supposed to live in. Who's going to live on $600 a month?
Yeah, that's
It's just
because you haven't because it's the nature of your work where you haven't been paying into the system that much. It's a crazy system. Don't get me wrong, okay? How do you live on $600 a month? I agree with you.
How many seniors are in that situation?
Oh, a
And
lot.
what
There
happened?
there are
Because
other programs that they get that you can
I
get
know,
more
I'm just
money.
using that as an example.
Sure,
But let's say with all the programs piled together, they're making $1,200 or $1,500 a month. That's what they have to live on. Okay.
sure, right.
What's inflation doing to that?
Well, you're not keeping up with inflation because the increase in
Not
those
even
in those
close.
is not it's not it's not keeping up with inflation. Let's just say
My
that.
point exactly. So then there's that to be considered. So look, I'm all for the entrepreneurial spirit. I love free market. I love the free market. I love the capitalist system, and I think we denigrate absolutely the wrong people. Anybody who can run a business, do it successfully, and have some kind of ethical code that they live by is a hero to me. And they should be required to pay no taxes at all because the risk they take to create the jobs that the tax base comes from is huge. If you wanted to start a logging business of any size, it's going to cost you millions of dollars. You're going to have to, if you don't have any financial, you're going to have to put all kinds of things at risk, pension plans, maybe your own home, any equity you have anywhere is going to be poured into that. And then the chances of success, 1 in 5 business started today are you have out of 5 business started today. I want to rephrase this. Started today will be gone 5 years from now with only one surviving. So you get a 1 in 5 chance of making it, even after all that risk. And then on top of that, you have to put up with all kinds of people out there, not just the government, but now young kids who don't understand the economic system we're in are calling you a greedy capitalist. Is it any wonder people don't want to take those risks?
Yeah, look. Now you're depressing me, Nick.
Well, believe me, there's still people out there
Look,
willing to take the risk.
well, the good news is that when you invest money, that there are opportunities for you to reduce the amount of tax you're paying through deductions and that for qualifying investments, etc.
Yeah,
So
you're right. I know. I'm just
it's not a black and white thing, but I I guess look, it would be a lot easier, a lot nicer. I'd be a lot more comfortable paying the taxes that I pay, and I think most of us would be if we knew we were going to get good value for the dollars that we're
yeah.
putting in. And when you look at the crap, some of the crap that our governments are paying for, it just becomes, I don't have a list in front of me, but what we're going to have to do a show sometime in the very near future and just go over some of the ridiculous things that our governments, the tax dollars, are being used to pay for. And listen, all you got to do, okay, if you really want to put the cat among the pigeons here, Nick, and you want to get people particularly inflamed, well, how about you take a look at what we pay for in our art gallery, in the National Art Gallery.
Oh
Now,
God, no kidding.
there's some pretty good art in the National Art Gallery,
Mm-hmm.
but there's some pretty stinky stuff in there too that
And they
passes
paid
as
a
art, or that's
big
being.
buck.
You remember Voice of Fire?
Yeah, that red stripe down the white paper.
No, 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 no. In fairness, I think it's 3 colors. It
Oh,
looks like a 3
sweet.
colored flag. Okay, I mean, the taxpayers paid millions of dollars for that. There's one item at the National Art Gallery that is I haven't been for a while now, but if I'm recalling correctly, is a toilet with some sort of a string or a line or rope attached that goes across the room or whatever. I don't know what it's supposed to represent, but here my theory of art is this, okay? If I could do it, it's probably not art.
Yeah, I don't
I
think
could
it's
definitely take
that
I
opinion,
could
but
definitely take a toilet and I could put it in the corner of a room. And not only that, I could take a toilet and install it so that it's functional. This thing isn't even functional.
oh
It's
my
supposed to
goodness.
be art. The guy that put it, the guy that did it, didn't even design and build the toilet. He just bought it and put it there. Now I don't know how
Yeah,
much we paid for it, but it's and I'm making fun now.
right.
But there are lots and lots and lots of programs that we pay for that really should not fall. It shouldn't be the responsibility of
Didn't
taxpayers to be paying
I
for them.
see in the news this week that Trudeau wants to pay $75,000 for the sexual reassignment surgery for any transgendered member of the government? Did I see that? Am I making that up, or did I actually see
Well,
that?
I haven't seen it, so I don't know whether you're making it up or not. But I trust
I'm
that you're not,
sure I
Nick. I
saw it.
trust that you saw it somewhere.
I think I did, but I thought it was here in Canada at the federal level, and it wouldn't surprise me. And you want to talk about look, the people who go through that, I'm not.
Look,
They're human beings, right? And I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but if you want to do that to yourself, spend your own time.
yeah,
That's that's one of the cases where they should learn that two-letter word that's all powerful. No.
well, the most important thing that you can teach your children is to learn to say no to themselves. That's always been my modus operandi when it comes to child rearing. The
And the
single
other
most important thing, you
part,
teach
when
them to
mom
say
and
no
dad
to
say
themselves.
no, they mean it.
Yeah. There are just so many things. I saw that I believe is it Hamilton, where there's a new hospital that's going to be built, or somewhere in the Hamilton area, and it received the largest corporate donation in history in Canada. And so they're going to build this beautiful state of the art medical center, Nick, and not a single penny of that donation is going to hire a doctor to provide medical treatment to people.
So they're putting the building up, but they can't put anybody in it.
Well, they'll put people in it, but of course, they have to find the funding in order to hire the doctors and the nurses.
Well, I
And,
meant
and again, as you know, we can't do that. You can't make a donation to a hospital to hire a doctor to provide emergency room care.
you
It's
see,
plain and simple.
if I was running and I know we're up against the clock, but if I was running to be premier, the first thing out of my mouth was say we're going to strike that law down.
Uh,
You want to
I-
improve healthcare? There's one way to do it.
Yeah, and I don't see how doing that would somehow or other impinge on our principle of universal health care. It wouldn't create private health care. It wouldn't create two-tier system or anything like that.
Right.
So, when you see the way that we handle our public finances vis-a-vis essential services, and then we're spending so much money on other things that are ridiculous, it's no wonder. Now, I don't think for a second that people are going, I'm not going to pay taxes because it's just they're wasting my money. I think it's just a question of I've got the money in my pocket. Nobody's checking up on me. Why don't I just keep it? I could use it for something that I want or that I need.
That they'll pay
So,
taxes on.
yeah, and I'm going to pay taxes on it anyway because I'm going to pay sales tax when I spend it,
Right.
won't I? So,
Yeah.
so you can't get away without paying taxes one way or the other. All right,
Well-
we're going to go for a break, ladies and gentlemen. So stay with us. So more to come. We've got lots of fiery issues to talk about coming up in the next hour on the Nick and Joe Show. So stay with us. We'll be back in a couple of minutes.
We all know that climate change is real. But with countries like China and India failing to do their part, what Canadians need now more than ever is a Made in Canada climate change plan. A real plan that responds to the real-world needs of Canadians. A balanced plan that supports responsible economic growth and strengthens our essential infrastructure. A responsible plan that protects our natural environment and ensures that all Canadians enjoy the blessings of clean air, clean land, and clean water for generations to come. It's time for Canadian politicians to show real leadership in the world, putting partisanship and ideology aside. It's time for a sensible climate plan. We're the International Climate Science Coalition Canada, and we're ready to help. To learn more, visit our website, icsc-canada.com.
Nick's having too much fun to that music.
Yeah, he is.
See, I can, unlike you, ladies and gentlemen, I can watch Nick on the camera when all of this off-screen stuff is going on.
Which isn't fair because I can't see him. So I don't know how hard he's laughing at me.
I'm Nick. I am not laughing at you. I'm not laughing with you either, but I'm not laughing.
I was just going to say, you know what that means. Anyway, I wanted to point out something that, first of all, Chrissy, better late than never. She says, darn, I'm late watching. Sigh. Go Leafs, go. Yeah, if they can stop getting injured. The Matthews took a nasty one to the inside of the knee last night. And the new guy, Mr. O'Reilly, is seriously injured. They don't know how long he'll be out.
The collapse has started.
It's not even playoff time. They're going to make the playoffs. They'll do just fine.
Yes, of course.
Anyway, I just wanted to mention that I feel her pain. And better that she joined us than late than never at all. So good to have her. Anyway, now we were talking before the show, and we always do this. We get doing the show before the show, which is a bad thing. But we were talking about different bathroom encounters I thought I'd let you tell the story.
Yeah, well, it's very simple. We all have been hearing about with the legislation of the I don't remember what the bill number was that passed a few years ago that allowed people who express themselves as females, males expressing themselves as females, and vice versa. Although it doesn't really seem to happen that much in reverse, are allowed to have access to female change rooms, bathrooms, etc. And all of that. I was fairly active in opposing this at the time, myself and other people around me, some colleagues of mine. And it passed. We weren't happy about it. We were concerned. We were continued to warn people that this was going to be a problem, and it has been a problem. We have heard about males and female change rooms, and of course now the big one that we're hearing about a lot in the news is males, transitioning males, or males who are expressing themselves. And this is an important thing for people to understand: expressing themselves as females. In other words, not transitioning in terms of having operations and stuff like that, but basically saying, yeah, I feel like I'm a male trapped in a I'm a female trapped in a male body, so I'm going to express myself as a female, but I'm not going to bother going through any of the operations or anything like that. So along comes. So we've known that this has been going on for some time, and it's always been sort of like theoretical for me until last week. Last week, my wife is a swimmer. She likes to go a few times a week, do laps in the pool, the public pool. Last week, she had an encounter with a guy in the change room, and she came out. She was talking to me about it. She was a little shaken up about it, um, but it really brought it home that we have now a situation, not just in this country, but we'll just focus on this country alone, where the law protects males' right to enter into a female change room, to get undressed, and to stand around with no clothes on, leering at the other women who are trying to get changed, trying to have some modesty, some decency. And you can't ask the guy to leave. Because if you ask him to leave, then you're violating his rights to express himself as a female. Now, all of this brought to mind the saying, what I thought was probably one of the more common sense, even brilliant observations of not Chief Justice, but Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, Stuart Potter. It was either Stuart Potter or Potter Stewart. I can't remember which the order of his name. Might have been Potter Stewart, actually. Anyway, who made an observation many years ago with respect to pornography and decency. The case that was before the Supreme Court of the United States at the time had to do with decency. And his observation was this: I can't define obscene, but I know it when I see it. And that's what I'm saying here. This is a terrible situation that we're in. And last week my wife took our granddaughter, 13 years old, skiing. Imagine if she had taken our 13-year-old granddaughter swimming on this particular day. Have we no more shame in our
No.
society as it collectively? And have we no more courage ourselves and as a political entity, our elected representatives, that they are not prepared to they're not prepared to put their foot down on this and put a stop to it?
The answer, obviously,
It's
is we
just
don't.
it's just so plainly wrong
Look,
that this could happen in our country.
this goes to the heart of what I've always said. If you think that changing in this case, your mentality to suit the scenario on a daily basis about your gender, then you don't need time in a change room. You need time on a psychologist's couch. If you think that changing the plumbing around is going to solve the problem, that's the same mentality as painting a car with a blown motor. You go fix the motor, not paint the car. Then you need time on a psychologist's couch, not on a surgeon's table. These problems are rooted within the psyche, within the mind. It's not a physical thing. And if the lie that's been told over and over again, and people have accepted, is that you can be whatever you want. And it's the extension. What we're seeing now is the extreme extension of that. Look, Ben Shapiro did a piece once. He was having a debate with a young lady at a university or in some public forum. And she was saying that, well, men can be women and women can be men. And he said, really? If that's true, then why don't you identify as 60? She said she didn't know how to answer him. He said, the answer is because you're not 60. And the truth is, you're a female, not a male, no matter what your brain tells you. And if your brain's telling you something different, you need some kind of help. But what you're looking for is not it.
But-
And I thought it was a brilliant rebuttal.
But Nick, all of that is true. Okay. But you're talking about the individual who truly believes that they are
No,
a
hold it,
female.
Joseph. I don't believe that a guy walks into a woman's change room, does it for any other reason that he wants access to females that no other guy has. And he's
Okay,
doing it on purpose.
And that's the point I'm making.
Okay.
The point I'm making here, because when you were describing the situation you were describing about the person who thinks a certain way and they need
Yeah.
counseling or whatever, okay, great. But we've created a situation where just on people's word, they can a guy can go into a woman's change room, get undressed, and just sit on that bench naked and watch the women get undressed as well. And all he has to do, okay, is say, but I'm expressing my gender identity. And not only do we accept it, but we have gotten to the point where we celebrate it.
Yeah.
And I don't believe for a second, although maybe I'm wrong, I'm prepared to accept that there may be instances where somebody may in fact feel that way, but it's not possible for me to police that. And I would go so far as to say this, Nick. Even for those people that you've described that maybe feel this way, okay, it doesn't take anything away from them. It doesn't harm them emotionally, psychologically, physically, in any way, shape, or form to say to that person, I sympathize with you, we want to help you, but you can't go into a female dressing room. Not being able to go and sit amongst naked females as a man, regardless of whatever your psychological state is, does not cause further harm to you. And I can't find the words. I mean, it's outrageous that we have let this happen, and it's as I said, I've been opposed to it. I was opposed to it in theory, but this now it hit home
personal.
now,
Yeah.
and it's and I don't know if I had been there. I don't know how I would have reacted, because I all for just walking in there, grabbing the guy from the scruff of the neck, by the scruff of the neck, assuming that he has a scruff of a neck when I grab him, and kicking the guy's butt out of that change room. It is categorically, absolutely, unequivocally, unarguably wrong for this to be happening. And it's
Well, a lot of people will
shame
argue
on
with
us.
you, but that doesn't make them right.
Shame on us that we've allowed this to happen. Shame on us that we aren't fighting back against this en masse and basically saying enough is enough. We're all going to get up in arms over taxation. But on something like this, imagine your daughter, your 13-year-old or 12-year-old daughter or 10-year-old daughter or granddaughter or niece or whatever being exposed to a guy like this and having the guy leering at them. I don't care. It's plain wrong. And it's shameful that our society not just tolerates it, but that we've reached the point in time where the leaders of our country, okay, celebrate it, endorse it, they celebrate it, and those so-called leaders who run for political office run far away from this issue because they don't want to be branded as extreme. I mean, what happened to our society where just basic decency in this area all of a sudden is extreme behavior? I don't buy it. I think
Well,
that if
first of
you ask
all,
people and put them in
if
that
that's
situation,
what
they'll
they
say it's
call
wrong.
if that's what they're calling extreme behavior, they're right, but they've got it on the wrong foot. We're not the extreme ones. They are. And that's what they need to be told. This is not extreme. This is unacceptable because it imperils the safety, the physical safety, and the emotional safety. I'm going back to your 13-year-old granddaughter. What kind of emotional, I don't want to say trauma, but you know, what would they be putting her through when she walks in there and she's in the middle of changing from her street clothes into her swimsuit? And look, this is criminal. That's the only way to put it. And we need to treat it as such. The trouble is, we've got, as you were just alluding to, and I'm just agreeing with you, the more I listen, the more, I've always been on your side on this issue anyway. There's never been any doubt of that. But until and unless we start electing people who are willing to stand up and say, if you elect me, I will do everything in my power to put an end to this. You want to know why Ron DeSantis is so popular in Florida? Guess what he did? He did exactly that. Now, there's more to Ron DeSantis than that, but that was one of the big things that helped him get elected in a landslide the last time, because he said, we're going to protect the children from these kinds of predators. And that's what people like this are. They're predators. And they have no business walking around freely amongst us if this is how they're going to behave. We have all kinds of checks and balances on behavior in public or in situations like this, or at least we used to, that would put you in jail. And yet he is allowed to sit there and say, well, I feel like a woman today. Well, that's funny. You don't look like one. Until you do, get the hell out. And if you won't go, I'll call the cops.
Well, the police won't do anything about it, Nick.
Well, but I'm saying that this is how we have to fix this, is by elect people and have people appointed as chiefs of police and district attorneys, crown attorneys, who will stand up and say, this is pedophilia if
I
there's minors involved. This is emotional sexual assault if there's not minors involved. Either way, it's criminal and you will be charged for it.
Okay. So what I want to do is I just want to circle back a little bit, and I want to say this, okay, is that there may be, just, I'm saying this for the sake of argument, okay?
Right.
I don't know. But let's just say that there are people who genuinely feel the way that we've been talking about, and we're oversimplifying it, but we'll oversimplify it for the sake of making the argument that
Right.
there are men who feel that they're women trapped in a man's body. Okay, so and that they really feel like women, and that for them it's a matter of mental health, emotional health, for them to go into a woman's change room. At least that's the way their thinking is, okay? Because that's always been the rationalization here, okay? I'm saying that even in those cases, in every case, including those cases, all right, they should not be allowed. And it
Look,
does no harm to them to tell them, look, whatever you're going through emotionally, psychologically, physically, okay, I can have sympathy for you. I care about you. I don't want to put you down. I don't want to disparage you, but you can't do that. You can't go into a woman's change room and plant yourself there. That's just not happening. And I do not accept that we are inflicting harm on anybody by drawing that line. So we don't even have to get into whether or not the emotional state or the psychological distress or anything like that is real or it's not real. I'm prepared to accept, for the sake of argument, that it's real in every case. It still does not justify crossing that line.
Look,
Okay.
on that
Period.
again, you and I both agree. And I think that when somebody tries this, first of all, you arrest them and you take them downtown and you have a clinical psychologist on staff who can sort them out. And the people who are just predators, you prosecute them, you give them a fair trial, and if found guilty, you put them in jail. For those who have the kind of psychological issues you're talking about, we give them the help. But you're right, this does not include access to places, whether it be a swimming pool, at a track meet, at any kind of public scenario. You're just not going to do that.
Yeah.
If we catch you, there will be ramifications.
Who is speaking? We're all concerned about mental health and psychological health, etc.
Right.
Lovely. Who is speaking on behalf of the psychological and emotional and mental health of the girls who are subjected to this kind of indignity? Who? I don't hear any politicians standing up in this country for innocent women and girls who
Well,
are being exposed in these situations,
you would
and
think that modern
the trauma that they're suffering.
you would think modern feminists would be all over this, that they would just be howling from every rafter. Rush Limbaugh used to call them the nag gang. Um, and where are they? You're right. If it's not them, then why not state or provincial legislators? People who are, that's what I like about DeSantis. One of the things I really like about him is the fact that he's standing up for families and for children because he's got the hammer. He's got the power to do it. We don't have anything like that here in Canada. And it's time that what's
Anyone
that?
like that. And we don't have anyone like that.
That's okay. I thought I said that, but maybe not. We
No,
don't
I
have
wasn't correcting you. I was just
okay, fine. You're right. There is no one in Canada who has that as part of their mandate. And I think it should be the number one. If you can't protect your kids, then what are you as a culture? That's the number one priority. Everybody's talking about, there's a lot of talk about sexual trafficking. Today in the news, there was a story about how the natives of the North are going to work with the RCMP to cut down on sexual trafficking. Great, wonderful. That's fine. I'm all for that because I got no use for sexual slavery the way that what we see now, where kids disappear off the streets and who knows what happens to them. All right, I'm all for putting an end to that. But what about the kids who are exposed to people like your wife is exposed to? You know what? Because I think that if you bring down the gavel, you bring down the hammer on this, you'll see a huge drop, an overnight drop in these kinds of instances. And those you do find, maybe they're the ones, maybe that's the filter. Maybe that's how you figure it out. Which ones are seriously got psychological problems that need to be, gently and compassionately dealt with versus the predators. Because a
well,
predator, if he knows he's going to get caught, he ain't going in there.
well, there's something seriously wrong with our society and with our political class that even amongst conservatives, okay, conservative, I say nominal conservatives, members of the Conservative Party, are not prepared to stand up and make this an issue. This is a huge issue. Because ultimately, when you talk in the last segment, we were talking about taxation and honesty and integrity. If this doesn't involve questions of character and honesty and integrity and decency, then what does? You rely on people, these gig workers that you were describing, Nick. Okay, and I just you rely on them to report their income, and you have to ask yourself, well, why would they report their income? Why would they feel that that's the right, a decent thing to do, and to do it just because it's the right thing, when we've created and we celebrate? This is what bothers me the most, is that we're celebrating this indecency.
Well, look at how often you see drag queens in schools with little children. Why would they want to go there in the first place? Is this just them being who they are as adults? Why will we allow that? This isn't exactly what you're talking about, but it's just another element of it. We really as a culture have dropped the ball on protecting the innocence of our youth. And it's enough to make you grind your teeth. I get so angry about it sometimes I can't even talk straight, because this kids are only going to be innocent so long. Leave them the hell alone. Life
Well,
will sort them out sooner or later.
I'll tell you, I am angry. On this, I'm angry. I don't often get angry on policy issues. I try very hard not to get angry, not to get mad. I follow the Winston Churchill adage. Okay, I don't hate anyone except for Adolf Hitler, and in that case, it's purely professional. It's just, I look at this situation and I'm thinking, I'm just fit to be tied, Nick. I'm beside myself with fury that we have allowed this to happen, and not just that we've allowed it to happen, because, okay, politics being what it is, the other side has control of the levers of power, and this is what they've done. What infuriates me is the fact that our own side has abandoned these questions. That they're saying we're not going to talk about moral issues. Well,
Everything's a moral issue.
everything's a moral issue. You can't legislate morality. I keep hearing that. No,
I know.
but you can legislate moral behavior. What is a law against thievery except a law enforcing a moral point of view?
Well, this is my point exactly. Even speeding laws are you could say the same thing. Somebody decides what's fast enough and what's too fast. Now, you'd hope they have a little bit of input from road designers and that kind of stuff, but I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But the bottom line is, no matter what law you cite, at its root, there is a moral component to it. Whether it's the way we deal with the homeless, or whether it's the way we organize our own national self-defense, immigration, all this stuff has a moral component to it. And for those who say, well, you can't legislate morality, they obviously don't understand what morality is.
Well, and
this is a flagrant violation of it.
Well, actually, it's even worse than that, because in reality, Nick, I think I've said this before, but in case I haven't, I'll say it again. All of you people out there that say we can't legislate morality, wake up and smell the coffee. Because what the other guys here, the other side of these arguments, they're not legislating immorality. They're not taking a neutral position. They are legislating and enforcing an alternative morality.
Amen to that.
That's what this is all about. And so, we have to, at some point in time, we have to put our foot down on this. Nick, we're going to have to take a break, which is good because I need one badly, believe me.
I'll send you up some Sioux Lookout spring water.
I need stronger than that. I need Prozac.
Prozac. All right. Well, the water
Okay.
washes down the Prozac.
Stay with us, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be back in a couple of minutes here on the Nick and Joe Show.
We all know that climate change is real. But with countries like China and India failing to do their part, what Canadians need now more than ever is a Made in Canada climate change plan. A real plan that responds to the real-world needs of Canadians. A balanced plan that supports responsible economic growth and strengthens our essential infrastructure. A responsible plan that protects our natural environment and ensures that all Canadians enjoy the blessings of clean air, clean land, and clean water for generations to come. It's time for Canadian politicians to show real leadership in the world, putting partisanship and ideology aside. It's time for a sensible climate plan. We're the International Climate Science Coalition Canada, and we're ready to help. To learn more, visit our website, icsc-canada.com.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. Boy, that was quite the half hour, Joseph. I don't often see you that passionate about us. I get wound up, but it's not often I see you get lit up like that, and you have every reason to be.
Well, Nick, I have to tell you, when I was younger, I was a real firebrand, and it took me a long time to calm down. But every now and then, they scratch the surface and they pull me back to my younger years, and I may not have the physical strength or whatever that I used to before, but by golly, gee whiz, I'm telling you, I'm just fit to be tied about this stuff, and I don't know what has to be done about it, but I would for sure have been involved in a physical altercation had I been there and I'd known that this was going on at the time. And I don't counsel anyone to be involved in violence or anything like that, but I have to be honest. Okay, there are times when you have to step in, and in this case, I cannot help but say that the law is wrong. And again, I'm not talking about people getting violent or physical or anything like that, but on this issue, the law is plainly wrong. And if you're just
Couldn't
joining us, you'll have to go back and listen to the podcast, or watch the whole show, because we are doing this live this week for
That's
the
right.
first time on on the Nick and Joe Show YouTube channel.
Yeah, I'm
So
looking forward to that.
yeah,
I'm looking forward to growing that channel. Now, you're completely within your, it's completely rational to feel that way because wired within the human psyche, especially for guys, protect the girls. And I'm sorry if that sounds misjonist or whatever the heck that word it is or what it means, but that's who men are. That's how we're wired. Through the whole of a human existence, men have been there to protect the women because the women were vital to the continuation of the group, the group, whether it be a tribe or a town or a country. These are those who don't have the same ability to defend themselves that men do. And so to feel that, you're really just going back to your roots as a human being and saying, look, this is wrong. This is a threat. This guy is threatening not only people in general, but my family. And I will not stand for that. And I will, if I have to, get involved and in a physical altercation, whatever form that takes. And I agree with you. I'm not counseling anybody else to go out and start a fist fight with somebody or, club them over the head. None of that stuff. I'm just saying that I can understand that because like a lot of millions of other people, I'm a father and a husband too. And if I saw one of my wife, I almost said one of my wives or my daughter, one of my daughters or my wife going through that, I would have very much the same reaction.
well, ask yourself this: what is the difference between what we described happening in this change room in the last segment, or some guy going to a park bench, sitting on a park bench, pulling his stuff out and diddling himself in front of
Right.
the kids' playground?
There
What is
is
the
no difference.
difference?
It's the same
There,
thing, just in a
there's no
different setting.
difference.
Yeah, at least the
And
guy in
the
the
guy
playground has to wear a trench coat.
here, and the guy, but here's the thing: is the guy doing this at the playground has probably just as many psychological issues as anybody else who's
Right.
doing this in a change room.
That's why he's doing it.
Okay, and that's why he's doing it. Oh
So,
man, I
but
just
but in the
I'd go
case,
to jail for this. I would go to jail for this.
yeah,
If I would,
and I think a
if
lot
I
of
had been
guys,
there, Nick, I swear to God, Nick, if I had been there, okay, I would have been in. I would have marched in there, grabbed the guy with the scruff of the neck, and said, "Out you go." And if you can't do that on your own volition,
I'll help.
I will help you, no problem.
That's right.
And throw me in jail, throw away the key. I don't care.
There are times when there's a great quote by J.R. Tolkien, and I'm going to butcher it, but it goes something to this. It says, "I care not for the arrow for its swiftness, nor the sword for its sharpness, nor for." Um, there was another one he added. I only care for that which it defends. And that's really the heart of what I would call being a man. And I know that sounds quaint and antiquated, but we need more men who are willing to stand up and take these guys on if they pose this kind of threat, because this isn't just, you know, um, some kind of offhanded slur remark as you're walking down the street. This is an overt attack on the dignity of the human person that your wife represents. I'm trying to say that it's an assault against your wife and her sense of decency and security, because nobody, when you're a husband and wife, that's not an issue. But when you're not, it's a huge issue. And the fact we've let that go down the drain, this is what they mean by when anything goes, everything's gone. And we're pretty much at that point now.
And I have to tell you, I read, I'm reading, Lori's, is it Lori's suggestion
Yeah,
about
we have that already.
LGBTQ change rooms and bathrooms and stuff like that? I don't agree with that. You know what?
We already have
Get-
them. They're called male and female.
Yeah, I just stick with with the change rooms that you are. Stop politicizing this. I know, Lori, you're not politicizing it. You're trying. It's a sincere suggestion. I get it, but here we go again. Spending tax dollars. Public. This is a public institution. It's a public swimming pool. Now we have to have female, male, LGBTQ, transgender. It at some point in time you just have to say, look, you know what? You're a male. Stick to a male dressing room. Stick to a female dressing room if you're a female, and that's
done
it. And whatever
accommodating
else
that.
is going on in your life, take it to the doctor.
Yeah. Again, I totally agree with you. Now, speaking of doctors, I think we should shift gears here.
Shift away.
There is, and going back to the COVID story we led with, it's kind of a parallel story. In the United States, here's the headline. This is from the Epoch Times. Senate unanimously passes bill to declassify COVID-19 Wuhan lab leak intelligence. In other words, what did the president know, and when did he know it? Is, in a nutshell, what this story is about. Let's see if I can find the right part of this. Senators Mike Braun, a Republican from Indiana, and Josh Hawley, a Republican from Missouri, reintroduced the bill on Monday after the Department of Energy provided a classified intelligence report to the White House and certain members of Congress, which concluded that the COVID-19 pandemic most likely arose from a lab leak. The FBI had previously come to a similar conclusion. Now, Joseph, let me stop right there for a minute. How many times were people like you and I, and not just you and I, there were literally millions of us, said, wait a minute, they call this the Wuhan flu because it came from Wuhan, China. And that maybe this was a leak from one of their labs, and we got laughed off the stage. It was ridiculous. So just keep that in mind. Tonight, going back to the story, tonight the Senate unanimously passed my bill to declassify all the intelligence the government has on COVID origins. Now, remember this. The Senate unanimously passed my bill. That means both Republicans and Democrats voted for this. Let the people see the truth, Hawley wrote on Twitter. In further comments during an appearance on Fox News, Jesse Waters Primetime, Hawley cited the importance of transparency and accountability in allowing up the public to understand the origins of the pandemic. The bill would require Director of National Intelligence Avril Haines to declassify the information in the U.S. government's possession on the most likely origins of COVID. And I think this is something else that you're going to see more of, because people are really beginning to understand that something's rotten in Denmark and it ain't the fish. When you have this, how much did they know and when did they know it? And did they operate, in spite of what they knew?
Well,
Because,
Nick,
go ahead.
on this, I take just a little bit of a different angle on this question. I take what you're saying at face value. I think it's important to have the historical record straight. Where did this a virus originate from? And all of that is fine. But the angle I take on this, and the thing that really jumps out at me, that bothers me about it, isn't so much. It's not so much the did it come from a lab? Didn't it come from a lab? Did it originate in Wuhan? Did it not originate in Wuhan, from Wuhan? What really bothers me is the justification, the argument against calling it something like the Wuhan flu.
Right.
Because and you know, people really, I think, need to grasp this. The reason that they're saying we shouldn't call it that is because if we call it that, we think that we're going to be creating some sort of a backlash against Chinese people of Chinese origin. And the first time I heard this kind of reasoning, all I could think of was, what kind of people do you think we are?
Well,
What kind of people do you policymakers, do you politicians deal with day in and day out, that you would think that we have to have a government policy, a regulation, a law even, prohibiting us from calling it the Wuhan flu, because somehow or other calling it that is going to lead to discrimination and whatever directed against people of Chinese origin or Oriental origin. You know, what it says to me is, and this is completely different than what people are talking about. Okay, with this, because everybody's very fixated on the actual origin. Okay, and that's an important question in and of itself. But what I really think that is the most problematic thing about this is how much of a low opinion our elected representative have of us, that they really think that somehow or other, if we call it the Wuhan flu, that we are going to be running around having a pogrom against Chinese or people of Chinese origin in Vancouver or in San Francisco or wherever.
look,
You
this
know,
whole
like, when was the last time that anybody did anything against somebody who was from Spain because we
Oh,
used the term Spanish flu?
I was going to use the example of German measles, but okay,
German measles. How about the
or the
Hong
West
Kong
Nile
flu?
virus.
The West Nile virus.
You know, there you go, run down the
It's
list.
again, it's this new thing where where we're all guilty of racism, and if we're not guilty of racism, then we are for sure going to have our minds, we're going to be brainwashed into being idiotic automatons, racist automatons, because somebody used a term that happened to be Wuhan, which I would not have. I had heard Wuhan flu, I would not have automatically thought China anyway. I would have thought,
Well,
okay, I
first of
don't even
all,
know who
it's
comes
not a
from Wuhan.
reaction against the Chinese that the government should be worried about. It's what it is a reaction against the Chinese government, the CCP. Because first of all, I saw a story like this along these very lines that you're talking about on CBC when I was doing show prep beforehand. I didn't bother with it because here we go again, you know, but you raise a good point. Nobody walks up to somebody who's of Oriental background and gives them a shot across the chops. Thanks for the Wuhan flu. Whack, you dirty. No, it doesn't happen. That's not the way people react. What people want more than anything else is the truth. They just want to know, first of all, if it's man made, why, how did it get out, and what are the impacts? And if the government of China is involved, then we should be taking steps against the government of China, not
Fair.
against people who are of Chinese extraction living in Canada. They're as Canadian as you and I are. I mean, it's just outrageous that they take this attitude. Now you talk
Oh,
about getting fired up.
I tell you what, I whatever the truth is here, I can live without the truth one way or the other. Okay, ultimately, it's not going to affect my life one way or the other, whether it came from a lab or didn't come from a lab. whether it came from China or didn't come from China. I'll just settle for being treated like a gall
Human being,
darn, like a gall darn
like an adult.
adult.
Yes.
Okay,
But you know
I'm an
something?
adult. I'm old enough to be your father in most cases, and in some cases, I'm old enough to be your grandfather.
That's true.
Okay, I thank you very much. I've earned it. I have earned the right and the privilege of being regarded as an adult.
But you
Okay?
know something? What the government should be worried about, and this is one of the reasons why I think they wanted to deflect away from the name, because the government of China needs a smackdown. It needs to be told in no uncertain terms. You cannot, this desire they have to rule the whole world. And believe me, I believe that right to my core, that's ultimately what's behind their foreign policy. Okay. Um, I think they're a bigger threat than Putin is. But
It
what the
could be.
government of Canada didn't want is to be forced into a position where they had to express that to the Chinese. And
Okay.
the Americans the same way because of Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and their links to the Chinese governments over there.
I think you're giving the government in this case too much credit.
Yeah.
Maybe there's an element of what you're saying is involved in the decisions. Okay. But I think I just think it's far more, just more fundamental than that. I think that these guys really think that we're stupid Neanderthals that are susceptible
Oh, I'm not
to
arguing that either.
absolutely the most inane, idiotic suggestion with regards to race, gender, and I think that this permeates all of the thinking that we're getting from these, so-called our leadership today, mostly on the left, but on the right too. Is that there's seems to be this. What it comes down to is this. Okay, do they or do they not trust the people of this country? Do you not trust the people?
Well, they've
Because if you
obviously
don't
made that
trust the
clear.
people, that's a serious problem in any democratic society.
Well, that has been made clear, and it goes
Yeah.
back to long before we ever heard the word COVID. It goes back to your environmental terrorism. Uh, and I use that term from a government disseminating misinformation about how bad off the planet is and scaring the living crap out of everybody and creating this new religion called science. So that's where it starts. You've got people running around. They've bought into this lie, and now they think they can fan those flames and continue the idiocy. And by decreasing, with the decreasing, um, how do I put this, educational standard in the country, people are
Well,
more and more gullible.
you know,
And you're right. They think we're a bunch of morons. And in a lot of cases, they're actually right.
but you're it's a you know, you're tying me up here, Nick, um, because ultimately, okay, in your rush to protect people, not your rush, but in the government's rush to protect people from bad ideas, okay, they have completely transformed our education system into one that doesn't provide people with the basic knowledge that they need to be equipped with in order to not be fooled by the bad ideas that are out there. So instead, what they do is, like, one of the what we haven't talked about on this show, Nick, is the report on the inquiry into the invocation of the Emergencies Act
Oh,
last
yeah, we
year,
haven't
because
touched that yet.
which was released a few weeks ago. But one of the suggestions that the commission comes up with is that the government has to spend more resources in monitoring social media in order to do more to stop misinformation and bad ideas and things like that. And as I said on my own show, when we were talking about this, I pointed out, well, the government monitoring social media, okay, social media is not like your mail where you expect a certain amount of privacy. Social media is like open conversations. So when we talk about the government monitoring, okay, and regulating social media, that is analogous to the government having spies out there walking around in the street, walking over to listen to what your private conversations are with two or three of you on the street corner. Okay, and by the way, if you think I'm exaggerating on this, I can tell you that's exactly what they did in East Germany. This is what the Stasi used to do, and they
It
had
wasn't
all
restricted to
kinds
them.
of it's crazy.
Yeah,
Uh,
well,
and
that's
it's just
that's the Soviet Union. It wasn't just in East Germany. They did that all
but
over the place.
but it was by far worse. East Germany was by far the worst example of how they used to do this, because it was everybody was informing on everybody else.
Right.
And that's what it's analogous to. And it all stems from this fundamental belief that you can't be trusted. You can't be trusted. Somebody's saying something that's wrong, you can't be trusted. Okay? To look at the facts, to delve into them, and make an independent decision. I have to tell you this, okay? I'm speaking as somebody who was vaccinated, just to get back into the whole COVID thing, okay?
Right.
Everybody out there that said, I'm not getting a vaccine, I don't see the reason for it. They were not only were they perfectly within their rights, but it was a perfectly reasonable position to take, it turns out. So all of that thing is about, we have to stop people talking about how bad the vaccines are because why? All right, I don't know that I buy into everybody, people's blood was coagulating when they got a vaccine and stuff like that. I don't know whether it happened or not. Was that true? Was it not true? I don't know. But the whole thing was, we have to stop people from thinking that there's a problem with these vaccines. Okay, I don't know. Don't take the vaccine. What was the problem with that? There was
Well,
ultimately, turns out there was no problem.
yeah, well, and you're right, and we do have to go over that commission's report. I think it was from what I've seen of it so far, and I haven't read the whole document by any stretch, just a whitewash. Just
I think I agree with you. I think it was totally a whitewash.
which doesn't surprise me considering who was running it. Now, you mentioned earlier your own podcast. How's it going?
Well, it's going, Nick. We're doing the podcast live Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of every week now, and people can catch it live on either on YouTube or on my Facebook page. But here's the really interesting thing, Nick, is that you can catch the video or audio podcast live right at the josephbenamyshow.com. There's a video of our show is embedded right there. So when it's time to watch the show live, you can catch it live there, or you can listen to it live as a live podcast right there as well. And I'm thinking that we're going to work on doing that for the Nick and Joe show as well, so that we don't have to send people to this Facebook page or that. Well, I mean, we'll still broadcast on Facebook, but we're having a great time. It's an hour long. As I say, 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern time. And I really urge people to check it out. And if you haven't caught it, you can always go to the website and click on listen to the podcast. And we have our whole archive growing of past shows there as well. So the nickandjoeshow.com or josephbenamy.com. It's the same website. All one word, but no hyphen in the name.
There you go. I was just curious. I wanted to give you an opportunity to plug that show because you have a lot of insights you bring to the table that people like me are a little too dense to think of at the time until the juices start to flow.
I wouldn't have said that, but
yeah, well,
anyway,
truth is ugly, but there it is. Anyway, so I wish you all the success in the world with that podcast. And that does not mean by any means that our relationship is coming to an end anytime soon.
Not a chance.
I look forward to We've got some plans for the Nick and Joe show that are coming up. We're going out. My wife and I are going through a bit of a, I won't say turbulent time, but a bit of a time of change in our lifestyle and what we're doing and those kinds of things. So that's going to kind of slow down the pace of change here.
Okay, we got to go. We're running
we do.
overtime here.
We are. All right, Joseph. With that, I'm going to bow out and say good night for both of us. For all of you, thanks for joining us. We'll see you all again next Sunday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And in the meantime, we'll be Caritas et Amor, Deus sibi est. Good evening. God bless. Don't let anything disturb your peace, and may you have a fair wind and a following sea.